All right, everyone. Good, noon, afternoon. Welcome to the College of Architecture and Design at Lawrence Technological University. And to those joining us online through our YouTube channel, we appreciate you tuning in. Before I continue, please silence your phones. Thank you. Important announcement for freshmen, the lecture is included in the newly launched University Experience and Engagement Program, Passport Program. So to get a digital stamp at the front of the room or the pizza table outside and fill in the form. My name is Li Su Huang. I'm an associate professor of architecture here at Lawrence Tech. And at Lawrence Tech's College of Architecture and Design, we focus on how design is evolving, especially as new technologies and changing professional practices reshape what designers do and how they do it. COAD is home to degree programs in graphic design, product design with a concentration in mobility, game design, interior design, and architecture, along with our Master of Arts in Design and Technology. Across these areas, we pay close attention to emerging tools, industry workflows, and the cultural forces shaping the built and design world so our curriculum stays relevant, rigorous, and future-facing. Our Design X Technology series is one way we do that, inviting leading voices into conversation to expand how we think about architecture and design today and where the fields are headed next. Just as a sort of reminder to register for the upcoming COAD Design X Technology series events on our events page and Experience Passport webpage. The one upcoming is Tuesday, March 3rd, Ulysses Sean Vance. But today, I want to introduce Jake Marsico, who is Chief Creative Officer at Deep Local, based in Pittsburgh, a creative innovation studio known for inventing, designing, and building interactive experiences for some of the world's most progressive brands. At Deep Local, Jake guides the creative vision, strategy, and execution of ambitious projects operating at the intersection of design, technology, and cultural storytelling. He leads multidisciplinary teams of creative technologists, designers, and engineers in developing installations that transform emerging technologies into human-centered experiences. His work spans AI-powered retail environments for Google to dynamic cultural exhibitions for the Museum of the Future in Dubai. From early concept development through fabrication and deployment, he ensures conceptual rigor while continually expanding the expressive capacity of creative technology. Prior to joining Deep Local, Jake founded and led Ultra Low Res Studio, an arts engineering practice dedicated to interactive and data-driven experiences within the built environment. He also developed and taught reactive spaces and media architecture at Carnegie Mellon University, where he earned a Master of Tangible Interaction Design and later served as adjunct faculty. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Religion from George Washington University, an academic trajectory that perhaps reflects the conceptual breadth and humanistic grounding evidence in his work. Across these roles, as creative director, educator, and founder, Jake's focus has remained consistent: to create tangible, experiential interfaces between people and technology, and to expand the creative and cultural potential of emergent systems through playful, embodied interaction. I first met Jake probably like 10 years ago when we were looking for someone to collaborate on a project that we had won a competition for. And my partner had actually kind of just chatted with him informally. And at that time, just through my partner describing Jake's strategy for approaching the problems that we had, I knew we had the right person. And so I think I'm really interested to see what Jake has been up to since. So please join me and welcome Jake Marsico.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really great being here. It's been awesome. Lee took me through a tour of the facilities, and it's been a really amazing space you all have here and really cool work that I've seen. So thanks so much for having me. Okay, well, I'm going to talk a bit about this, tangible experience versus the slop feed. This was like, this is a collaboration title with ChatGPT. We kind of argued about how cool the title could be. But ultimately, we want to talk about like the challenges that we face as people who are designing spaces or physical things, and the challenge of pulling people out of like the digital tunnel that has become the feed. It's a very successful piece of technology that many of us are addicted to. But I'm going to talk a bit about myself a little bit and kind of my journey to get here. So my dad was an architecture and travel photographer. I mean, he's still alive, but he's retired now. And so this is in the 90s, late 80s. He was a travel photographer. He also did architecture photography. But all of his work centered around people and how people experienced the world. Even when he was doing architecture photography, there were always people in that space, and often people shown as in motion. And then as a kid, you know, my mother was a school teacher, which meant that I was extremely fortunate, and I got to travel with my dad as he was going on these travel magazine jobs, like all over the world. And so all of my memories of a child are very human and physical, like struggling to talk to strangers in another language, or kind of moving through these weird spaces that I wasn't used to, right? Like novelty and kind of like exploration of culture and people. Like, and this is kind of, you know, how I remember my childhood. Ultimately, that like travel being this kind of like ultimate novelty finder, this like vehicle for novelty. And I'll talk a lot about novelty here because I think that's a real piece of the work. It's a kind of a critical component of the work that I do, and I think it's a key piece to why the feed is so addictive for many of us. After that, as Lee mentioned, I had a fairly like not normal path to getting to where I am now. I went to school and studied religion at George Washington in Washington, D.C. My second week as a freshman, I was not a religion major at that point, was 9/11. I saw smoke coming out of the Pentagon from my dorm room, and all of a sudden, America had a new enemy, which was Muslims. And that was bizarre to me. And so I ended up studying religion with a focus on Islam. I was a pretty idealistic young guy, and I could not come to terms with the idea that we had this like wholesale enemy on our hands. That was a whole culture. After graduating with that undergrad, I moved to Egypt and then to Dubai, and I lived between those two countries for about 5 years. And during that time, I was really interested in photography, you know, kind of following in my dad's footsteps. I had access to like really nice cameras and stuff, you know what I mean? And so like photography was kind of this natural pursuit that I was interested in, but ultimately realizing that like that was not a realistic career path for myself, seeing like what was happening in the industry in the early 2000s. Like even at that time, the photography path was waning. But it was also an opportunity, like photography gave me an opportunity or a medium to kind of like re-engage with people in spaces that I was in. When I moved back to the US in 2010, this was my basement. I started getting more interested in interactive media and electronics, like teaching myself Arduino, working with like kind of show control systems, like Gilder Fluke, probably things that, you know, are more common in show control spaces. DMX, interactive lighting, you know, that was my little desk right there with one of the computers sitting on the washing machine. But during this time, this late 2010, early 2011, two things were happening. One was the Arab Spring. And so in Egypt, which I had very close ties to, there was this like kind of very public uprising or revolution against Hosni Mubarak, their authoritarian dictator who had been in power for, I don't know, 40 years. And at the same time, there was all of this anti-collective bargaining legislation happening in the Midwest, in states like Ohio and Wisconsin. And in those two states, the governors were trying to restrict the teachers' unions from being able to negotiate on their contracts, essentially like ruining the teachers' union. I'll wrap this all up. But basically, my mother was a teacher, and in my mind, teaching in public schools is like the perfect encapsulation of the middle class, right? Which is like, in my mind, like the ultimate American dream of like a strong middle class where you could work, you could kind of have a good, healthy work-life balance, and you could afford a nice lifestyle with a family. And it was very clear, and it is still clear, that dream is dwindling, right? Money is pouring out of the middle class, and there's legislation that's accelerating that transfer. And this whole time, again, I'm gonna wrap it up. This whole time, in my mind, this is kind of what happened in Egypt over the past 40 years, right? That country had a very cosmopolitan, thriving middle class of sorts that was kind of erased away through this like kind of authoritarianism. So this ended up being my first installation where I really kind of tried to do interactive technology in an experiential context. As you can see here, I traveled to Ohio and Wisconsin. I interviewed all of these retired teachers, I took their portraits. I'll let you play through.
Our real spending buying power in the marketplace is less today than it was in 1973 when I started.
From
Our
1993,
buying, my buying.
well, till the present, we have really been losing consistently in the rate of inflation, because you remember that the 90s and especially the 2000s were
Walker came in saying, okay,
so
here are these
They wanna
rich
have it both.
teachers and these lazy unions, and they have all this stuff, and you don't, and so the solution isn't for you to get more, it's for them to get less, and probably
I
you to
can't
get
tell you how much money we've spent over the years just to keep our classrooms operations. And
I don't understand why my governor had to come in
There have
and in a
been
matter
all
of
kinds
weeks, take away the safety net.
I believe that corporations have taken over the media, and I don't just believe that.
Outside of Milwaukee County, therefore, students and this county executive.
Better than success stories.
negotiate.
with very few. Anyway, that's, we're the middle class and we're shrinking.
That video took longer than I thought it was. I apologize. But the idea was, in this space, you walked into the gallery. There are all these big, large format portraits. Everybody was staged in the portraits to be looking in a specific direction. So you have all these folks sitting on their couches at home, watching TV. On the TV in the center of the room was a football game, Ohio versus Wisconsin. There were kind of like Halloween, haunted house sensors built into the couch. When you sat on the couch, it triggered this whole show. And then you saw what happened. So apologies, that took quite a long time. But that was my first experience in kind of interactive technology and what it could do to kind of elevate what might be a traditional experience or a traditional way to engage with a story, right? I think just that act of triggering something through human motion was really intriguing to me, and that's kind of like kicked off this whole thing that's really ultimately sent me to grad school. Okay. So this is really the bulk of the talk here, is the feed versus tangible interaction. And I think that, I want to start by saying, like, the feed, TikTok, Instagram, news, like the digital feed that is presented to you through your phone is an incredibly successful piece of technology, and there's zero denying that. I think it's almost impossible to deny it, right? It is so well tuned, it has evolved so quickly, and that's, I think, what makes it so scary. And I'll start by saying that, like, I'm extremely proud of my feed. My TikTok feed is awesome, right? And I will, like, argue with people if they disagree. So I'm going to show you some of my favorite TikToks in my feed just to kind of give you a sense of what it gives me. This is kind of, this is some shabby music. It just hits very hard. Yes, you can feel the party, right? Or mountain biking. I love mountain biking. You know, it can be the middle of February and that's me imagining that I'm doing a 40-foot gap and this is like not real, but like this is what happens after I watch the Egyptian music or just like the incredible talents of people. It's insane, right? Or kind of more, I love brass. I love brass. I've never played a brass instrument, but. Yeah, insane. Like I get chills every time I watch this, like actual full body chills. Or this is something, has anybody seen this? This is like something that's happening in Brazil where they've got these like modified tractor trailers that are covered in LED. But like they've got all these, it's this weird subculture. I actually know nothing about it, just I see it all the time. Of like people who are dancing with these like costumes. I think these are like Brazilian cartoon characters. Yes. Like this hits so hard. This is so good. And that's me, like living my whole life like this, right? Like lying in bed in the dark at 5 a.m. or 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 2 p.m., like staring at my phone in a complete hole. And I think what's really interesting, like these feeds are so good at doing all of the things that like travel did for me as a child or physical experience does for me now. It's novel, it's engaging, it's exploratory, right? It's people, right? But ultimately it's extremely isolating and, you know, it's very hard to break free of this. And I think the movie I always think of is WALL-E. Like to me, like we are so far on the path to WALL-E. Has everybody seen WALL-E? Right? Just like complete like slugs, very content in our just like kind of complete consumption of this digital media. And so this is like what we're up against as designers of spaces or experiences or even things, is how do we compete with this? Like, you know, and I don't have the answer, but I think this is ultimately what I'm trying to say is this is our challenge as designers, is it's harder than ever to get people out of their house or to kind of be better than this, right? And so what are the things that we have to do? What is like kind of the challenge at hand? And you know, there's some things to think about, right? Like the feed is very fast. It's extremely personal. This is like I think this personalization is maybe one of the biggest challenges is that, you know, my graduate program, my thesis was this idea of peripheral computing and peripheral presentation of information, right? You know, what can we build into the architecture that is beautiful as the architecture and presents information in this like a very peripheral way. And it was essentially a failed hypothesis because very little information that we consume is public or interesting to a multitude of people. Almost all of the information we consume through our devices is hyper-personalized, right? The news that you consume is hyper-personalized even. That's why all of these really cool experiments you see for peripheral computing or media architecture is like traffic, weather, maybe stocks. Like what else is there? What other public information is there that anyone who walks through a space is interested in? This is a real challenge when it comes to creating these like physical shared spaces and experiences. It's also very private. It's extremely effortless, as we know. Like flipping your thumb is much easier than moving your arm or moving through a space or moving your head around or traveling somewhere. And it's also replaceable. And so I think the challenges of physical is like it's slow, but these are also the challenges and the benefits. It's slow. It forces you to slow down and be present. it's shared, it's very expensive from a time point of view and a production point of view. It is high friction, right? But it's also very memorable. And this last piece is kind of, again, I work at Deep Local, we're a marketing company, we're in the business of like selling this sort of stuff. And this last word is really like our main selling point, is that if you are a company and you want to tell your story, doing it in this physical interactive way is the most memorable way of doing that. That's essentially our main pitch, when we try to like sell the work that we do. Okay. So I'm going to kind of walk through a few projects that I think shed light on how this stuff could happen. These are some projects I've had a lot of fun with, I'm really proud of these like physical experiences that are using technology. Sorry, I missed the main point there, is that the integration of technology into these physical experiences that we're designing is, at least for me, like the secret weapon of like kind of competing against this extremely attractive, extremely successful digital feed, is how can we use technology to kind of create these magical moments that are equally as engaging and surprising and novel and fun and memorable as what the feed offers. Right, I think that's what I just said. Okay, so the first project I'm going to talk about is actually the first project that I worked on with Lee and Greg, which was this latent escapes. And this is this is one of my favorite projects of all time. Maybe some of you have seen it, but this consisted of, I think, 1,600 individually controlled illuminated blades of grass. As you walk through this really gorgeous landscape, these blades of grass like kind of had these blooms of color that that kind of flourished across it. I'm gonna watch the video. It's only 51 seconds, that's good. You'll kind of get a hint of how this works. So I think this project is so memorable to me because, one, it was the first really big project I ever worked on with like a permanent installation of interactive technology that was open to the public. And just if you couldn't tell from the video, as people walked through these mounds, we had these like brake beam sensors, and as one of those brake beams would be triggered, we would kind of have this, we had this digital backend that had this fluid sim that would kind of spread color across the entire space. It didn't really work that well. I mean, we ended up burying all these wires. I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest, so I'm glad I tricked you into having me work with you, but we buried all these like low voltage wires, and ultimately it only showed like white and sort of red, and it was kind of glitchy, which is a side note here, is that like, it is really important to be failing. Like if you deliver a project and that some part of it isn't working, you weren't pushing your ambition enough. And that's something that I really firmly believe on. And it is a part of, there's a mentality that I try to promote with all of my colleagues, which is that you should look at everything you've done in the past and both be proud of it and extremely critical of it. Because I think that self-critique is really what will always push you to do better and learn. And I think without self-critique, you're going to be stuck. And I think we can't afford to be stuck. We have to always be trying to improve what we're doing in these types of experiences. The next one is Google Lobby Flowers. This is one of my favorite projects of all time. This is, I was a creative director and technology lead on this project. It was my first big project after joining Deep Local. And the brief was actually really simple. Google was renovating one of their lobby spaces in Manhattan, and they had this like kind of big two-story lobby space with a two-story window that was right on the corner of 9th Avenue and 15th Street. And they wanted something that was both engaging for visitors inside the lobby, but also would kind of engage people as they walked past. And in early concepting phases, we kind of identified that we wanted to activate this big volume above the guests' heads. And we also kind of had this idea of this like undulating surface. I'm quite the grasshopper novice, but I knew that I could like subdivide a, flowing surface. And that was an easy path to kind of get a cool sculptural feel with lots of individual units that were individually activated. And I was working with an industrial designer at the time who was super into origami. And so we knew we had this design foundation of something interactive, lots of individual units in this undulating kind of overhead curtain type thing. And he just kind of came in one day and was like, yo, check out this origami thing I did, which I think was kind of some predecessor to one of these two little GIFs in the corners here. And what we came up with was this flower mechanism. And you can kind of see a bunch of the tests here. This flower is beautiful, and I think what I want to talk about here is just like teamwork and collaboration. And one of the best things about being at Deep Local is that we have industrial designers, we have motion designers, we have semi-architects, but we also have mechanical engineers and electrical engineers, and we all sit together. And so this flower unit was like the best example of that kind of collaboration, right? Where all of these folks were really stoked on this idea and kind of bouncing drawings back and forth, and we ended up with this piece that was built out of sheet metal, powder-coated sheet metal. It had these like really wild little linkages. That's Tyvek. That's like folded Tyvek that was printed on both sides. Printed on both sides. And we developed this. We developed several prototypes. We were doing all these motion studies. And the interaction is such that, when you walk underneath this canopy, these kind of puddles of color open up above you. And it's actually a three-state, these flowers are have three color states. It's white when it's closed, it is orange when it's half open, and then it's like either yellow or white again when it's fully open. And so we built this whole back-end logic system that, if you stood in one place for long enough, these flowers would open up even larger, and kind of this puddle of color would spread around you. And if you walked away, that puddle would remain for a few seconds and then kind of start to dissolve again. We also built this so that it was responsive to people outside. So after hours, after the lobby was closed at 5 or something, all of that interactive sensing technology was focused on the outside. So we had these depth cameras pointed outward. So if you walked past the lobby windows, you would get this wave of color that followed you. So I'll show some of the video of this. Running, if you're ever in New York, walk by, or I think you can probably walk in the lobby and check it out. We recently oiled the hinges. We were supposed to do that every quarter, and we did it once in the last 6 years. But it still works, actually, which is really cool. That's like a real testament to the engineering team that designed these things. But I think, so when we're talking about tangible interaction design and kind of how we design these experiences, there's a lot of learning here, right? One is this plays very well in a video. I think one of the things we learned is that like not many people notice it, right? And because it's high up out of the way, right? And so is that a failure? Is this an Easter egg? I don't know. If it's an Easter egg, it's a very expensive Easter egg, all right? I think, we could say it's successful because it's like low friction interactivity. This is what we would call like a reactive installation. It doesn't require active interaction on the part of the user. There is a component of this that did require active interaction, which was, you might have seen it at the end. There's like a little screen that says, do this thing with your hands, like antler pose. There's like a hint. I don't think anyone's ever done it, ever. And so that's like a user experience failure, right? I think, I don't know, a lot to learn, but ultimately this is a really beautiful piece that engages people in this like really kind of soft, peripheral way that I think can be really successful, and it certainly plays well on video. On the other end of that spectrum is this project that we did also for Google called Be Internet Awesome Adventure. Well, that was like this kind of peripheral responsive sculpture. This was a series of like very intentionally interactive experiences geared towards children to kind of teach them about being safe on the internet. And this was a Google project. This is from Google's brand studio. Just it's like full disclosure, like how these things actually happen, right? Like Google Brand Studio, their job is to promote a version of Google that presents itself as this like very beneficial force in the world. That's where the funding of this came from. It's a wonderful project. I'm not gonna go there. Okay, so this was a series of physical digital experiences that we developed specifically for kids that had a couple of different kind of educational goals. And I think I use this example all the time as like what I think is like really, really beautiful and novel physical digital synchronization or integration. So all of these examples that I'm going to show had like big 4K screens in them, but all of the ways that you interacted with them are very physical and very kinetic in nature. So I'll just talk you through a few of them. This is like kind of what it looked like. This was a 2-day event in San Antonio, which is like just crazy, the amount, whatever. Yeah. So this is the first one. This is a password building exhibit, right? And so there was I should use the laser pointer. Huh? There was this mound of blocks right there on the bottom that this kid's about to knock over. And you would pick up these blocks and like use them to create a password in these different slots. And every time you put a letter in, a digital pylon would come up for this bridge, okay? And if your password was good, after all these pylons were built, you'd say, okay, test out my password. These blocks would fall down onto this bridge that you've created with your password. If your password had lowercase, uppercase, all the stuff, it would hold steady. And if it was an inadequate password, the digital bridge would collapse. Solenoids behind all these blocks would push all the blocks out, and it's like kind of like not violent, but like it's kind of aggressive motion. It was like really exciting for kids, very physical, very kinetic, but ultimately it was a digital experience in many ways. This is one about spamming people, and what we built, I don't know if you could see that. We built this system where you would take a physical card that had an RFID tag on it, and there was like 50 different cards. Each one was like a laminated card that looked like a different email or a text or something, and you would drop it into a slot. The RFID tag would let the computer know which card you had, and then as you dropped it into the slot, a digital version of that card would come up on the screen, and your screen was also like a bazooka. And the kids would have to determine if this card was a spam threat or not. And if they determined that it was a spam threat or not, they could actually the card would digitally crumple up into a ball and shoot off of the screen. And as it shot out of the screen, a real foam version of that crumpled up ball would shoot out of this air cannon. Again, it was really loud. Let me play it again. It seems like you don't understand what I'm saying. Let me try to play this again. Here we go. Oh, shoot. Let's go back. Here we go. Is this it? Sorry, guys. I think it's worth watching because you'll see what I mean. Okay, so this is the cannon. Digital ball. Shoots a physical ball as it shoots out. Okay. It was really loud. Does anyone else, does this make sense to anyone? Okay, sorry, yeah. Okay. It was super fun. It was very, very loud. Every time the client came to visit, they would kind of give us hell about how loud it was. And in the background, we're like, keep it loud. Like kids want it to be loud. Like the kids want this air cannon. Anyways, it was a blast. This other one we did, let me get back over here, in that same experience was like how to route messages. It was all about sharing stuff. So if a friend sent you an email and said, I'm really sad, is that something that you should share with other people? Probably not. So in this scenario, we had all these blocks, and then we had this grid. And so an email would come in, it would fall down this column, and then you would take these angled blocks to kind of like reroute the digital path of the email into either like safe to share or not safe to share. The electrical engineers hated this project. The sensing technology built into that grid was a mess. It worked, but it didn't work all that well. But again, like a really novel use of two big digital canvases, physical overlay, physical interactivity to interact with the digital itself. I love that project. Also, kids, if you're ever designing for kids, like you cannot test stuff hard enough for a kid. Like you just can't. Like you get your biggest friend to jump on it 10 times. That's nothing to what like a 5-year-old can do. So just heads up, if you're ever working on a kid-centered thing, they're gonna break it for sure. Okay, Friends with You is one, we just talked about this in your class just before this, Carla, but this is a project that we worked on with this artist duo called Friends with You, and I think this is another beautiful example of what physicality in space brings to an experience, right? This is something that just cannot exist digitally, right? I think it's important to call that out. It's also a different vision of how humans could interact with AI and robotics. So I think it's we don't do a ton of art work, but on occasion we do work in the art realm or kind of the museum realm. So Friends with You is an art duo who their aesthetic is like very kawaii, kind of. And they came to us with like this sketch. They had a commission at the Cleveland Public Library to build the band, which was this blissful autonomous, the band stands for Blissful Autonomous Neurodancers, a set of autonomous roaming interactive robots. They will enact a choreography by playing with visitors by emitting light and sound to create simple, fun, and emotional interactions. And this was the whole brief. They like sent us like this picture. And they're like, here's the brief. And we were like, oh. So this is a takeoff of this. So this is an installation that they had done in the past. And there are like people inside of these things with wheels. And they would kind of move around. But they wanted a 6-month engagement at the Cleveland Public Library with fully autonomous robots. And they did not have a good budget. In fact, my entire drive up to this, I was talking with our managing director about how we will probably never do something like this again because it was like a really, really expensive project. And we lost a ton of money, but and I just kept my mouth shut because it was very cool. But ultimately, we built this thing. And it was a huge engineering project. And this was both an engineering feat and kind of a massive learning experience about what it means to design interactive creatures, and how easy it is for humans to believe a story. I think that's like my big takeaway here. So we used a series of, sorry, I gotta keep using this. This was our base robot, which is like an industrial Roomba, essentially. I don't know if any of you are playing with Roombas in any of your classes, but it essentially had an API. It was a wireless thing. You could kind of control it through software autonomously, or without a human or remote control. And then our mechanical engineering team kind of built this whole skeleton system, which had these big kind of, what are those skirts from the kind of turn of the century? Corset or the hoop skirt. A hoop skirt skeleton or shell that was mounted at the top, but also kind of dangled like a bell. And so I don't know if you can tell this, but the whole thing is kind of suspended from these little outriggers here by ropes hanging down. So the bottom could kind of swing, which gave us a lot of, I would not say control, a lot of variability in the motion of these things. And it kind of really allowed them to feel alive and have personality. And then in that space, we also, in the Cleveland Library, we developed a tracking system that consisted of 8 depth sensors. And then the robots themselves had these little dongles on the top of their head that kind of we were using radio triangulation or something. I'm actually not sure what the tech was. But let me play the video. You'll kind of get a better sense of how this whole thing
has been a project that's been pseudo in our heads for, I don't know, probably like 4 or 5 years at this point.
We're bringing these new life forms to life that are representative of wavelengths, the ability for us to see technology in a cute and friendly way.
It's an experiment, but it's also something that's so much in our wheelhouse.
Some like shared qualities we definitely have is like the ability to enter the unknown together. We allow room for error to help us innovate further.
The reason we chose to do it at the end of the day is because it's the type of work that we love, and the team was just very excited about the potential to work with like such a creative collaborator and friends with you, doing something for such a public activation for the Cleveland Public Library.
Working with them is really refreshing. They've been wonderful. They really want to push the boundaries of what's possible.
This was a incredibly ambitious technical challenge, developing a 3D tracking and real-time mapping architecture using depth cameras, and it involved real-time control of commercial robots.
Digital is interesting, but I feel that there's like a huge visceral need for tactile and coming together in a communal way.
Seeing these like really incredibly kawaii characters in this really historical library, that juxtaposition of like historical with something so futuristic, I'm really just excited to see that.
I'm here at Deep Local because I think that the work.
Okay, the rest of this is like, this is a marketing video for us, so we're just talking about how awesome Deep Local is. I'll change it. Okay, but like this was an incredible project. We learned a lot about technology, but ultimately what we learned was that like people want to believe in this stuff. People really are craving these types of experiences. There's such little amount of cynicism for anyone who walked into this space. Like, and that was partly from the kind of design of these blobby characters. It really kind of let down everybody's guard. But also just like the story behind it. Like, I think when we're talking about pulling people out of the feed, I think it's a massive challenge for us. We have to present novelty. We have to present the ability to explore, but also we should acknowledge that like people do want to go do things, right? But I think they want to go do novel things. And so just this idea of novelty is almost a cheat code in many ways, right? Is it something that people haven't experienced before? And if we can pass that test, we're well on our way to kind of bringing people out, you know? Okay, last one I'm going to talk about of these projects, I'm going to talk a bit about AI, or should I cut it off right now? Okay, this is a Museum of the Future. We worked on Museum of the Future in 2020. Museum of the Future is a speculative design museum experience attraction in Dubai. If you're ever in that region or flying through Dubai, it'd be worth it to kind of get a free layover and check it out. They're currently working on the new version of it, which is a whole new theme. But we worked with an executive creative director named Emily Baltz, who is a multi-sensory artist. She actually works at Gensler now. I think she's still at Gensler. And she came up with this concept of the spa of the future. And so this is set in 2071. The purpose of this spa is like digital detox, right? That people are so, at that point in time, people will be so pulled into their digital world that this spa is specifically designed to give them a space to reflect or kind of pull themselves out of that space. But it is not like a Luddite spa, right? It uses technology intentionally to accomplish that goal. One of the experiences that we built was called hand massage. We used a series of, you probably can't see here, the contrast is pretty poor, maybe on this screen. Ultra haptic, it was called Ultra Haptic. It was in-air haptic device. It was actually a series of like 256 ultrasonic transducers, and these engineers of this product figured out that like they could create like ripples in air on your hand based on like the interference of these like ultrasonic sound waves. It was completely bonkers. And effectively what it meant was you could put your hand over this thing and like it felt like someone was like underneath you, like blowing air on your hand or something. But like they could blow circles or bars or ripples or whatever. This was an early iteration where we were trying to like kind of do this haze fog hologram thing. So we're projecting into a haze curtain. We didn't end up going that route, unfortunately. But this is what we did end up with, is like these little booths, and there's this binaural audio track. The other project that we built was this one. It's called Universal Harmony. This was even more bizarre. It was truly, truly, truly a bizarre concept. You would sit around this fake rock with a floating rock in front of you, and you would hum into, this is the group experience. Everyone in the room had to hum into these like little railing pieces. And as you would hum, this like kind of star projection would like unfurl in front of you. And if everybody was humming together for long enough, this like kind of climax of light and sound would happen. But here's the kicker. What you can't see here is that like right above this little glowing thing was a little grill. And behind the scenes was a homemade scent diffuser with compressed air behind it. So at this climactic moment, we would actually like shoot this custom scent right into your nostrils. And you would like smell ozone. It was wild, but it was really cool. And we designed the whole thing. This is funny. We designed the whole thing, and like the museum was like, there won't be any docents. Everybody has to just like figure this out. And so we spent like months like, oh, how will they learn what to do? And then like, if you go there now, there's like this docent standing in the corner like yelling at you, like you're not humming loud enough. You have to hum more. And so it's a very different experience than what we designed. We did a big cool projection mapping floor with particles. It's like on carpet, so it feels different. Yeah, it was a beautiful experience. If you ever get to try it, go for it. And I think it just shows, I think it's a beautiful example of what is possible with technology for interactive spaces, essentially without any digital screen at all. And I think one of the reasons this is so beautiful is because the architects behind it, Atelier Bruckner, are extremely talented, and it's all encompassed in a very beautiful space. Okay. What about AI? It makes the problem harder. It makes the feed more successful. And I'm using success intentionally, not better. Successful in its own goals, which is it's extremely fast. AI content is hyper-personalized. I think we should all assume and get comfortable with the idea that those really nice AI ads, or those really nice ads in your Instagram feed, that's like, oh, it's exactly what I was thinking about. Like, in 3 years from now, it's gonna be like you on the mountaintop with the sick jacket on. Like, it's gonna be like your face, right? It's just, the personalization component is terrifying, but also maybe awesome, I don't know. Private, I don't know. Very easy to make, it's completely replaceable. And so I think this is really our challenge here, is that there's two ways to think about how we as designers use AI. One is as an efficiency multiplier, right? Who here is way faster at creating renders with AI than maybe they were before? Or designs, or we use it at our work for pitches all the time, right? We're not sketching a concept anymore. We're sketching it internally to think about what it might look like, but ultimately like nano banana that thing, right? And it's like we get these really beautiful, consistent sketches. In my opinion, AI for efficiency is a race to the bottom for everyone, right? It's unavoidable, but it is not good. AI as an efficiency multiplier is probably not good for the people in this room, including myself. AI as a vehicle for new modes of interactivity is potentially how we stay relevant as designers and creators of these things. It's how can we use this incredibly powerful tool to create experiences that weren't previously possible and that are more magical than what we could have made if we weren't using AI. Is that possible? I'm not sure yet. But like any new technology, there is untapped potential. I won't go through all of these, but I'm going to show you this. One more thing. If any of you have built an experience using AI or like a generative AI, like an image maker in an experience, the design challenge is the same as designing any other experience, which is we need to create a system where people experience like real agency and exploration. At least for Deep Local, that's like a key part of these experiences that we're designing. Do people feel like they actually have a choice in what they're doing? So we have to maintain this like illusion or reality that people have agency in the experience, but also letting our designers retain control over tone, authorship, intent, trust. Do people actually feel this is real? It's the same challenge in designing any experience. It's just the mode of doing that is very, very different. So over the last 4 months, we built an AI photo booth that is very, very fun for people. I won't show the whole video. We've built a custom badge generator. So this is like kind of what these badges look like. This is for an executive briefing center. I know it sounds boring, but an executive briefing center for Google in DC area where public servants kind of walk in. They're there to buy Google product, but they can essentially fill out a form and kind of create their own custom like challenge coin type of an artifact. And this is what it looks like. And then I've put the video way off to the side because I can't actually talk about it, but you can kind of guess who it's for. But like you can't actually, if you take a screenshot, you won't actually bust me. Like don't take a screenshot. But essentially, this is an interactive box that is voice controlled, and this is using the Gemini Live model, which is like kind of like the talking model, right?
In a field of giggling flowers. They make a funny noise when the wind blows. Look, there's a tiny sock hopping around. It seems lost.
So this was a prototype that we built. It was meant to be a prototype. And the idea was that it was kind of like a really smart Alexa or Google Home that had an interactive game for children and their caretakers. This particular one was a choose your own adventure story. And so we just kind of like prompted Gemini. We're like, okay, here's the general gist of a story. Start telling your story. Ask the people what they want to do next, right? I think what's wild about this is like, this GIF here is, I'm scrolling through the prompt. This entire experience is a prompt, right? I think this just like blows my mind that like you can boil down the structure, the pacing, the sequence, the tone of an entire experience into 2,000 words. And I think this visual to me like underlines this new style of design for experiences that we're kind of wading into, where like designing experience through the prompt is very important and it's completely new. And is this successful? Is this like a good experience? Like not sort of, it's cool, it's novel, but like we learned quite a bit. So anyways, that's the end of the AI spiel. I don't have a lot to offer. I've not come to terms with it. It is is an incredible technology. It is terrifying in many ways for a lot of reasons, but there's an opportunity for all of us to like engage with it. I think we have to engage with it, and we have to use it to create better things. So this kind of summarizes it. Why tangible experience? It embraced the body. We need to imagine new ways of experiencing story, offer opportunities for shared experience, and let people explore. Okay, that's it. Thanks very much.
Do we have time for questions? Yes? Maybe a couple questions, if anyone has. I know some people have to run to class, but... Oh.
It seems to, I think a lot of creators that the danger with AI is no attribution and no compensation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and I hope that all of these lawsuits, these like class action lawsuits, net out in favor of people. I really don't think they will. I think the power of capital is unstoppable. In general, my feelings towards AI are my same feelings towards our version of this country's economy, which is completely dominated by money. And in a way, the way I am trying to think of AI is that it's an unstoppable future. It's not worth fighting against it. It's more like the judo of like, how do you take this train and redirect it in some way for good? But yeah, that is one of many incredibly huge problems that I think I'm not really sure how they get resolved. And yeah, I'm maybe a little defeatist in that way.
Speaking of money, you mentioned the Friends with You project got really challenging from a budgetary point of view. Like as designers, how can we? I think a lot of us experience that, whether it's a student project or, can you share a little bit more about the experience or what you learned from it?
From like a finances point of view, or
from a project planning point of view.
I think so at Deep Local, we have people whose job it is to think about money, right? And it's like almost a gradient. You've got producers whose job it is to keep the budget on track. You have engineers who are kind of figuring out how to make the thing that designers came up with, and they're often doing like a feasibility study after. Okay, here's my BOM. Here's how many hours I think it'll take to engineer or build this whole thing. They're sort of thinking about the cost implications. And right now, we don't really ask our designers to think about that. And what ends up happening is we get this very, very long feedback cycle where our designers think of something, it's beautiful, everyone's stoked. They show the client's stoked, right? Everyone's like, yes, 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 yes. And then we come back and we're like, that is 200 times more expensive than what you have money for. And we have to do it again. And the problem is there's a fixed amount of time, right? And so what you end up doing is you just have like 2 cycles of trial and error. And so I guess what I'm getting to is the ideal, in my opinion, there's like 2 schools of thought. One is like, let the creatives create, man. And the other school of thought is like a creative who has an instinct about cost of production will get better ideas out into the world because they won't have to go through this kind of feasibility, failure, redesign cycle that is just, it means you will run out of time to do cool things effectively. So that's my thought there. And in this situation, that team wasn't really concerned all that much with budget overruns, and it was more of an hours budget thing than like a hard cost budget thing. So, but yeah, I think for designers, like having an understanding of how long it takes, material cost, just general engineering feasibility is like a secret weapon. And if you can bring that to your creative builds or your designs, you'll probably get your designs out into the world more often. Yeah, that's at least in Deep Local, that's kind of how it works.
Get my steps in.
Thank you for coming. And I know you mentioned this the first slides that you traveled and have this experience with different cultures. My question is really it's kind of two-part. Is where do you get your like ideas and sort of like references and things like where do you get them from?
References, Instagram, you know, I mean, blog posts. I think it's like really critical to see stuff, you know, and not like, I think a really, like not just a breadth of design, but like a breadth of everything, right? What are the trends right now in Argentina, right? And like what is happening in the world on a larger scale? I think having like design specific reference is really important, but just like understanding what's happening in popular culture. That's important for us at Deep Local because we're in this like kind of marketing realm and the brands that we work with want to be culturally relevant. But yeah, I think in terms of ideation, there's at Deep Local at least, we have two different versions of people coming up with ideas. One version is deep research, clear strategic brief internally, and then hitting ideas coming out of that brief. There's another version that's like sparks, you know what I mean? And sometimes there's like people aren't one or the other, but there's two different ways that people come up with ideas, and they're efficient and inefficient in different ways. I think one of the pieces of our company culture that we try to foster is like really aggressive exposure to stuff. Like we're really trying to foster a culture where people are constantly sharing cool stuff that they're seeing, talking about it, building a real point of view or opinion. I would say like having an opinion is probably the most valuable thing you can form in your life when it comes to design. Like being able to say like, I don't like that for these specific reasons, or I really like that for these specific reasons. I think building a sense of that is really important for any sort of creative work, I think.
What are your goals with designing, or aside from completing it?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, it is, are we meeting the brief? You know, we get these very specific briefs. So for example, I don't know, do any of these projects actually, a lot of these projects were just like building other people's ideas. But we'll get a brief from a client that says, we need to talk about this brand story about this product. Here's the product we want to talk about. This is how we're currently talking about the product. This is how that product and the way that we're talking about it relates back to our brand. So Google Assistant, you know, from 10 years ago, this is how we're talking about the Assistant. This is what that means for the larger Google brand. And then we have to come up with ideas that are aligned with that kind of storytelling approach or narrative approach. And then we kind of have to answer these general questions about experience design. Is this engaging? Is it novel? Is it high throughput, right? There's like kind of this combination of these like more qualitative questions to answer and these very quantitative, pragmatic questions. And I think, you know, it's a muscle. You know, most folks that come to Deep Local are not really good at coming up with ideas for a couple of years because it's kind of this like ill-defined process. You just have to like work, and, you know, eventually get the knack for it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I maybe just had a question or a comment more about, I know like earlier on you kind of had, we've kind of talked about this before, the idea of like calm technology, right? And I think it was Arthur C. Clarke, I might be misquoting, was that, you know, sufficiently advanced technology should appear like magic, right? And I think like there are a lot of things in our technology space nowadays that feel like magic, but also there are things that once taken away would really annoy you, right? Just in the same way that like, I always kind of think about like phones and the fact like if there was some kind of aliens who came to the world and then they just looked at this, they wouldn't realize what it really is, right? And like if I lost my, you know, car remote nowadays, I would be so annoyed, but it's not something I used to have like maybe 10 years ago, right? So like, I think what I'm interested in is like thinking about the different ways that technology can be more integrated into the environment, which I think is like part of in different ways what you're trying to do. But then for it to actually be deployed at a scale large enough that people can use it every day, and it would be an annoyance not to have those things. And maybe that goes back a little bit to your thesis as well with like peripheral technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the dream, you know. But I think ultimately, I think the determination I came to was like, you can do anything with a lot of money. You can build an incredible space with fully integrated technology that is just as beautiful as the design space, and it's seamless, right? But that is not an off-the-shelf approach, and so it's limited and it's exclusive. And so I think, you know, if any of you are going to product design, like for big companies, the Samsungs of the world, you know, I think that's the space where it has to happen ultimately, because, you know, all of the technology in this space is really beautiful and it's all off the shelf, maybe some customization, right? And most places, 99.99% of the built environment, new buildings, just can't afford bespoke work. And I don't know, I think it's a real challenge. And it's like, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's kind of a sad reality of like, are we stuck with black rectangles everywhere? Black rectangles being a screen, you know, and you know, maybe we just get really good at masking them into like ovals or something, you know what I mean? I don't know, but yeah, it's real.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.